오케이. 한국말을 잘 못해서 영어로 하겠습니다. My name is Gun, and I am a compulsive gambler. And by the grace of God, rooms like this and people like you, I haven't had to place a bet since July 22nd, 2012. I remember that day well, the day that I last placed the bet. About a month prior to that day, I had gotten laid off from my company that I'd been working for the past 8 years. Even though I'd been laid off because of my gambling problem, they were gracious enough to provide me with a generous severance pay. It was much more than I had expected. And 6 months prior to being laid off, my wife had left me because of my gambling. She also took our 3 children, who at the time were 7, 6, and 4 years old. We had been married for 8 years. She knew going into the marriage that I had a gambling problem. But I think she thought marriage would settle me down, and starting a family would make me more responsible, and the compulsion to gamble would go away. I thought the same as well, but it never did. It actually got progressively worse. Because my wife was taking care of all the finances and my paycheck was going directly to her, I started borrowing money from friends and coworkers so I can gamble. I also borrowed from vendors that did business with the company I worked for. I was good at borrowing, and people trusted me. When I could no longer put off paying back the loans that I had made because I lost it all from gambling, my wife would somehow take care of it with the promise that I would not do it again. But I never kept those promises. And this cycle would continue throughout the marriage. Eventually, people were no longer willing to lend me more money because they all knew by this time, what it was being used for. So I began to steal. I stole from my company. As I mentioned, the obsession to gamble grew progressively stronger and stronger. I knew that what I was doing was wrong, but I would justify it by telling myself that I was only borrowing it, and that I would put it back before anyone would find out. I'm not talking about a few thousands, here and there. It was actually in the tens of thousands of dollars. Even then, my wife bailed me out. She borrowed from her parents, and from the equity from our home, she was able to pay back the money I stole. I think the only reason I wasn't fired at the time was because the owner felt sorry for my wife and the children and the situation that they were in. All these events didn't stop me from gambling. It actually made me want to gamble more. The more I thought about the money I lost, the more I felt the need to win the money back. Or at least that was the reason I was giving myself. This cycle would continue again and again. And of all the horrible things I did to fuel my desire to gamble, and the one that I regret the most was when I took the 돌반지 that my wife had saved from our daughter's first birthdays and sold it so I can gamble. My wife had wanted to take those rings and make wedding bands for our daughters when they got married. But now that will never happen. I took something that was so pure and so tender, and without thinking about the magnitude of what I was doing, I destroyed it just because I could not control my compulsion to gamble. I realized then that I was capable of doing just about anything, so I can continue to gamble. Given the opportunity, I think I would probably have sold my soul to the devil to continue to gamble. all these events took a heavy toll on my wife. Needless to say, there were many other episodes that occurred besides the ones that I previously mentioned. But the one that finally broke the camel's back was on December of 2011, when I failed to bring home the paycheck once again. She had finally had enough and left with the kids. I couldn't see it at the time, but that was the only option that she had. I never thought that she would leave. We were married and had 3 children. And the stigma associated, with being a divorcee would not allow her to leave, so I thought. I now realized that she had to leave for her own survival and for the children. I tried getting her to come back, but she would not believe, any more of my lies. After she left with the kids, now I was free to gamble as I had always wanted. Before, I always felt pressured when I gambled because I had to do it behind my wife's back. I was constantly trying to hide the fact that I was gambling. That's why I felt I could never consistently win, because I couldn't devote more time and energy into gambling. But now I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to worry about going home after work. I didn't have to worry about picking up the kids after school. I could stay out all night. I didn't have any more responsibilities other than to gamble. I still needed to work, not because I wanted to, but because I needed the money in order to gamble. I thought the only way my wife would come back to me was if I won back all my losses and take care of all my debts. And then I would promise that I would never gamble again and everything would be okay. And that was my best thinking at the time. Money to me was the answer to all my problems. So for the next 6 months, I gambled away my every paycheck. I would get paid every Fridays, and by Monday or Tuesday, I would lose all my money. Most of the times, I wouldn't have any money to buy cigarettes. After 6 months of this lifestyle, I lost all hope. I couldn't live like this anymore. I wasn't winning like I had planned. I was being constantly pressured to pay back all the loans that I made. Some threatened to tell my wife what I was continually doing. Others threatened to tell my boss. I didn't know what to do, so since most people knew what I was doing anyways, I decided to tell my boss what was going on. He pretty much knew what was happening. We both decided it was in the best interest for all involved that I no longer work for the company. I was hoping against all hope that I had built up enough credit while I was working there, and that they would giving me some severance pay. Against all odds, as I mentioned earlier, they gave me a generous amount. My hope at this point was since I had enough money to go on a serious gambling run, I had a chance to win it big. This was going to be my last chance. So I went to Vegas to begin my road to redemption. On the first trip, I actually came back up a couple of thousand. But I knew at this pace, it was going to take some time before I could make the amount that I wanted. I needed to increase my wagers. I needed to gamble in the high limit tables. So the following week, I went back to Vegas to try my new strategy. Needless to say, it didn't quite work out the way I had planned on. Basically, I lost everything I had in a matter of 3 days. I just couldn't control myself. As I continually lost, I didn't know how to stop myself, or just to slow down, never mind take a break. The more I lost, the more I increased my bets. This has been the pattern of my gambling career. Basically, my life was in the balance. My life as I knew it depended on whether I had enough money to go back to my family. But this is the thinking of a compulsive gambler. The inability to stop when The inability to stop even when my life was literally crumbling all around me. When I got back from Vegas, I had approximately $300 on me. I wasn't going to mention this, but the severance pay was like $30,000. And from $30,000, I had $300 left. So the gambler in me thought that I could churn this $300 into something big. As you probably can guess, I lost the last of my severance pay playing poker at the Commerce Casino to a lady who caught it straight on the river. I had pocket aces. It was only fitting. That day was July 22nd, 2012. I sometimes wonder how I became a problem gambler. I always thought I grew up in a normal family. I was the fourth child of 5 children. I have 3 sisters and 1 brother. We as a family immigrated to the United States in December of 1975. I loved growing up in the U.S. The country was so big and everything was so plentiful. I loved going to school. Elementary school was fun. We all went to church every Sunday. We were very active in church. I was even an altar boy for 8 years. I played Little League Baseball for 4 years. I always thought my life was normal. However, looking back on my childhood, what I found out was that our family was never very expressive. We tended to keep everything to ourselves. I lost my space. We never really had deep conversations amongst us. I never noticed this as a problem until I met my wife. Her family spoke to each other every day, every single day. They laughed, they fought, they made up, they visited each other. What I realized at the time was that they expressed their feelings. They communicated with each other. But that didn't occur in our family. Of course, we all knew our parents loved us, but it wasn't communicated as often as a child needs to hear. That's when I realized that wasn't normal nor healthy. My dad also was a problem drinker. He would get loud and angry when he drank. He was never physically abusive, but emotionally, I think he did a lot of damage to us siblings, but especially to our mother. We just learned to live with it. We all just kept to ourselves. I don't know if this all contributed in making me a problem gambler, but I'm sure it didn't help. The first time I was introduced to gambling was on my trip back home from graduating from college. My dream growing up was to fly planes, and it became a reality. I attended Norwich University Military College of Vermont, and upon graduation got commissioned as a naval officer and was selected to fly planes in the United States Navy. I was living my dream. After my graduation, my friends and I stopped by Las Vegas on our trip back home to Los Angeles. We didn't stay long, maybe a few hours, but I was hooked. I loved the idea of making extra and spending money, and it seemed so easy. I would stop by Vegas or Reno whenever I came back home on leave from the Navy. I also stopped by on the way back. When I got transferred to Washington, I somehow found an Indian casino that had just opened up, not too far from where I was stationed. This was the beginning of my downfall. Up until that point, gambling was not a regular habit. The Indian casino changed all that. I made regular trips to the casino to a point where it was affecting my flight training. It got to a point where my commanding officer that I needed an intervention. I stayed in a rehab for 30 days in Long Beach Hospital not too long after that. Yeah, it didn't do any good. I was back gambling as soon as I got out. Bottom line, I lost my dream career as a naval officer due to my gambling problem. This was to be the pattern throughout my adult life. I do well, established myself at a company, earn the recognition of the ownership, but eventually screw it all up. As I mentioned, I thought my life would change once I got married and had a family. That was not to be. Now I realize circumstances and situations could change all they want, but if I don't change or have the willingness to change, I will never stop gambling. They say gambling eventually leads to prison, insanity, or death. I've never been to prison, at least not yet. I did many things that were illegal and wrong, but for whatever reason, God has spared me that option for now. My life and lifestyle was completely insane. No sane person could do what I did for the past 22 years. And I was on the verge of death just before I ended up coming into the house of Thanksgiving. I began to write goodbye letters to my wife and to my 3 children. I felt my life was hopeless. I didn't know what to do. The only option that made sense to me was to commit suicide. And then at least my wife and 3 children could receive the $500,000 life insurance that I have. I know that it's not that much, but that was the least I could do for everything I put them through. I knew since I had the insurance for more than 2 years, I actually had 7 at the time, the insurance company would pay regardless of whether it was a suicide or not. I knew that going in. I was ready, but the only thought that came to my mind was that of my kids and them growing up not having a father. How difficult that would be for them. And to top it off, they would have to live with the shame of their father committing suicide. That was when I realized how selfish that would have been. I was taking the easy way out once again. So with the help of my mother and a childhood friend, I was introduced to Dr. Hong and the recovery program he was running. I know it was the grace of God that led me here. I know for a fact that had I not come to House of Thanksgiving July of last year, I would either be dead or in prison. What had transpired the past year has been amazing. I came into House of Thanksgiving thinking this was an opportunity to show my wife that I was actually doing something to fix my gambling problem. So eventually I can get back together with her. And maybe after 6 weeks, I could leave. But it didn't work out that way. Actually, my way. God had other plans. If only I had willingness, only if I had the willingness to be open-minded. I found that the willingness when I was doing the 3rd step of the recovery program. It states that made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. For whatever reason, this step gave me the willingness to allow God to take over my life. It resonated. It resonated with me. And trying to live according to His will. This step has opened my eyes to let me see what the recovery process truly is. I've come to realize through the process how much God has blessed me and how much He loves me. I also came to realize how important my family is how much I love my wife and my kids. I just pray that one day I will get an opportunity to reunite with my wife and kids, God willing, and become a family again. You know, this program has saved my life. It literally has. And I don't know, I think if you're honest and if you're genuine and if you work at it, you can find a new life. I still get so many urges. But luckily, when those urges come, I pray. Sometimes the urges are still there, but a lot of times it goes away. I know God didn't put me on this earth to live my life as a gambler. I think there's something more that's out there, It has to be. I don't want to live like this anymore. Just really tired. But Dr. Hong and his ministry, and this recovery program has given me the opportunity to be able to stand here in front of you and not be so nervous and say, if you work it, it can work. I don't work a perfect program. I know I don't. But I think I'm trying. So, Dr. Hong, thank you for giving me this opportunity. But I also want to thank Kwanzaa-nim for sticking around and being there for Dr. Hong through all those, times. Because if it wasn't for your service and your devotion, I don't think Dr. Hong would be here and provide this service and to work the will of God. I think that has been destined for him. So, once again, Mrs. Hong, thank you. And thank you for listening.